Why'd the dragon cross the road? To burn down everything. If you're not already aware, it's Dragon Week, an incredible TTRPG community-driven event created by the fantastically talented Ginny D and Pointy Hat that allows creators in the community to create a video around a specific theme. And this year, it's dragons. So after you finish watching my video, I implore you to go check out the official Dragon Week playlist, which I'm hoping I remember to put on screen here, otherwise there'll be a link in the description, so you can check out all of the other exceptionally talented creators talking about dragons. Now that I've covered all that off, let's talk about implementing some dragon taming mechanics into D&D. I'm a big How to Train Your Dragon guy. Toothless has made me cry more times than I care to admit. You know what? No, I don't care to admit that. It happens a lot. I'm even cautiously optimistic about the live adaptation, even though it doesn't need to exist at all. And because of this, I've always loved the idea in D&D of implementing some way of befriending or taming your very own dragon who can accompany you on all your adventures. Like, imagine if a ranger could have a dragon as a pet. The amount of people who main playing as a ranger would go up like 900%. Obviously though, the idea of transitioning the taming aspects of something like in How to Train Your Dragon doesn't exactly work in D&D because dragons are much more powerful, intellectual and magical creatures in the D&D setting, so you can't necessarily just strip that away and make them kind of tameable beasts. But that doesn't mean we can't give it a shot. Long story short, I've homebrewed a bunch of rules so you can have dragon companions in your D&D campaign. Because man's best friend actually has an elemental breath weapon and wings. I envision when it comes to our scaly winged friends, there'd be two different avenues of befriending one and making one your companion. The first would be raising one from a dragon egg, but definitely not stealing one from a dragon nest. Wait, do dragons have nests? I don't actually know that. Google tells me sometimes, so that'll do for now. So you've got the whole not stealing an egg from a nest option, or the much more exhilarating route, befriending or taming a wild dragon. When a player first encounters a dragon in the wild that they intend on befriending or taming, there's a couple of cool things we can throw in to make these encounters more unique and make them approach every situation differently. And the first one would be setting the dragon's initial temperament. Just like every person ever, dragons going to have drastically different responses to various things in the environment and various different people they meet, so we have to have a system that kind of reflects that. To do this, as the GM when you're introducing a new dragon, roll a d6 and use one of the following different temperament options to set what their kind of motives are. If you roll a 1 on the dice, the dragon's going to be aggressive and will probably attack on sight. If you roll a 2, the dragon's going to be defensive and wouldn't want adventurers to approach it. A 3 would give you a curious dragon who would be more reactive to what the adventuring party does. A 4 will give you a passive dragon who may simply ignore the adventuring party altogether. A 5 will give you a playful dragon who may initiate contact with the party but not in an aggressive manner. And then finally, if you roll a 6, you get a hungry dragon, which only has eyes for one thing: food. Each of these varying temperaments will then in turn determine how your players need to approach these dragons in order to try and befriend them. For example, an aggressive dragon might respond to brute force or intimidation, whereas a curious dragon might respond more positively to something much more unique, like your players mirroring its actions. Once your players have successfully approached the dragon, the physical checks for taming it can follow the following structure. First, roll an animal handling or preferred skill check against the dragon's taming DC, which the GM will set. If this happens to be a nat 20 or 5 above this DC, the dragon immediately trusts you, but we'll explain that a little bit later. On a success, the dragon's attitude towards you becomes neutral and reduces the DC for subsequent checks. And you need 2 successes in total for basic trust with the dragon. On a failure, however, the dragon becomes defensive or aggressive based on how many times you've failed. And the subsequent DC for trying to retame after a failure goes up 2 every single time. But for now, we'll remain optimistic and say you had successfully gained some trust with your preferred dragon, so now let's talk about how you can further bond with them. And we'll do this with the newly introduced and very simplistic bonding system. You may feel a little bit overwhelmed with all of the new things I'm throwing in here, and I know no one wants more rules when it comes to D&D, but you can optionally grab any of these and interchangeably use them with whatever you want. I'm just giving as many options as possible. The dragon bonding system I've designed can be broken down into 5 different levels. Most dragons will start in the bonding score range of 0 to 3, which means they'll keep their distance and are pretty wary of you. Once you've gained a little bit of trust, however, you'll probably end up in the 4 to 7 range of the bonding score, which means you're allowed to approach the dragon, but for the love of all of your appendages, don't touch it. For a bonding score of 8 to 11, it now means that the dragon trusts you and would allow you in most circumstances to pet it, just don't be an arsehole. For a bonding score range of 12 to 15, the dragon will begin to obey basic commands and combat instructions as you further your bond with it. And for the final range of 16 to 20, this is when your dragon will be the most loyal to you, and if it is old enough, will allow you to mount it and will intrinsically defend you. Of course, you'll obviously need some additional ways of accruing bonding points, so here's some fun ways of doing that. For all of the following options, I like to put a limit of 1 per day or 1 per every couple of days, just to make the process of bonding with this magnificent magical beast a bit longer, because it should take a bit of time. Let's just think of a dragon like a big dog, and if you can find a way of launching an oversized cannonball to play some fetch with one, I think that should be worth a bonding point. On a more sincere note, healing or caring for the dragon after it's injured from combat or pre-existing injuries would accrue 2 points. Spending time training the dragon in a new skill, which would take about 4 hours of downtime and a relevant skill check, would get you 1 point and a possible new skill. And then of course, the most obvious option is feeding the dragon would also accrue you 1 point. Just expanding upon training your dragon for a second, I think if you're loyal with them and you dedicate enough time and that bond is strong enough, you'll be able to pick up new dual combat maneuvers that you can both implement at the same time. Like, just imagine a 40-meter dragon performing a sneak attack. You know what? Indulge me for a second here. Scales shaped like leaves quiver in the wind as their hues shift to match the surrounding autumn palette. You, on the back of your emerald dragon, gaze down at the quarry beneath you, as your winged companion lifts its scales to emit a barely visible mist. The scent of fallen leaves and river mud masking its natural musk. One of the patrolling bandits beneath you lifts their head to stare into the forest, with their nostrils flaring at the fresh smell filling the air. And then, when the bandit lowers their head once again, the tree snaps in half as your dragon launches itself with impossible speed, immediately crushing the bandit in the mud with its talons. Dragon sneak attack, baby! And I know what you're thinking. Arlo, you've got such a way with words, and you're so handsome and charming and funny. And although the latter of all of that is very true, I can't take credit for the poetry that I just described, because it all directly came from Describe, the sponsor of this video. If you're looking for tools to help you bring your TTRPG world to life, Describe is the service for you. It offers over 10,000 beautifully written descriptions of locations, NPCs, monster items, and dialogue that are all ready to drop directly into your campaign. Are you in need of an awesome description of what the spell Bark Skin actually looks like for your new players to further immersify them in the session? Immersify is not a word, but we're going to say it anyway. But perhaps your description of the location just isn't enough and you need a map and soundtrack to match. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Describe offers scene descriptions, battle maps, and a brand new audio library in the new offering Opus, which provides a huge library of immersive sound effects, scores, and ambience tracks to suit whatever setting you're in. But I know sometimes seeing it and not actually using it in action doesn't quite do it justice, so if you use the code ARLENTRIC at checkout, you'll get 30 days for free to try all of these features. So head on over to Describe now and check it out for yourself. Now, back to the dragons. Do you remember Tamagotchis? Okay, really bear with me on this. Tamagotchis, to an extent, perfectly represent the entire process of what I have in mind with this dragon companionship. First, you get your own magical little dragon egg, and then you nurture them till they hatch. And then you get to be overjoyed or slightly disappointed in whatever comes out of the egg. And in this dragon iteration, we don't have to worry about cleaning up all of the excessive shit that's scattered all over the screen. And best of all, as they continue to age throughout their various maturation phases, they confuse you as their actual maternal figure, even though you're just a living, breathing human or a gnome or a dwarf and they're a 40-meter long dragon. But what are those maturation phases, you ask? That's an excellent question. In these rules that we're building out, every dragon's going to have 3 phases of growth. A hatchling, a juvenile, and an adult. We're going to slightly accelerate the process at which these dragons mature through these different evolutionary phases because not every D&D species is going to live long enough to see their hatchling dragon turn into an adult, unless everyone's playing as elves and cringe. So, for our dragons, every 4 levels they're going to go through one of these evolutionary phases. Let's just think of them like Pokemon. But of course, at every individual level, they'll still get increased hit points and various new abilities. The major changes at these evolutionary phases, however, will much more be centered towards challenge rating, so they'll just drastically get much more stronger, they'll get more fly speed and fly height, and a couple of new, much more powerful abilities. Now, you've acquired your new dragon best friend. You've bonded with it, hopefully. It'd be rude not to ride it. For the purposes of simplicity, we're going to treat our dragon companion when it comes to being a mount as an intelligent creature that takes its own initiative. And what it can actually do on any of its given turns is entirely dependent on what its typing is, what level it is, your bonding level with it, and all that kind of stuff. As alluded to earlier, incorporating some form of tandem maneuvers for spending the time training your dragon in various combat effects is a fun way of offering ways of, demonstrating the bond that the two of you have in a combat setting. So here's some suggestions of what this could actually look like. If you had a defensive orientated dragon, you might teach them the ability Wing Guard, which allows them as a reaction a couple of times between long rests to extend their wings to block an incoming attack and give you additional AC. If you had a much more combat-oriented dragon, you might train them the ability of Coordinated Flurry, which allows them, after you've made a melee attack, to use their reaction to take an additional bite or claw attack on the same target. Or my personal and slightly overpowered favourite, so maybe you could use it at like max loyalty and max level, is Twin Breath Strike, which means whenever you make an AoE spell attack, your dragon can make a matching like AoE natural breath weapon attack, and all creatures in the areas take double damage from both spells. The options are really endless here because they're entirely dependent on what kind of dragon-player relationship you have, so you can work with your GM or work with your players to figure out what these tandem abilities can be. You know what? I think that's a nice place to tie a nice scaled bow on this video, so let's wrap up here. As a reminder, be sure to check out the full Dragon Week playlist to check out all of the other creators' videos if you want more dragon-themed content in your life. And until I see you again, go watch every single How to Train Your Dragon movie like 2 or 3 times, and if you don't cry once, you're a monster.